Outside the privacy of your own home, all speaking is public speaking. And if you think of public speaking as any area of speaking and communication that helps your career, that's public speaking. What we have to do for ourselves and for anyone on our team is create a successful experience so that we can replace the fear slowly. I mean, people are often amazed, and you know yourself, you're seasoned, you know what you're going to say, you're a subject matter expert, but there's always a little apprehension before a big presentation.
Managing a global team is complex, but Deel makes it simpler with payroll, HR, IT, and compliance all in one place. That's why over 35,000 businesses trust Deel to hire, pay, and manage their teams worldwide. See how Deel works at deel.com/nickday. That's DEEL.com/NICKDAY. Deel, your forever people platform. Hello and welcome back to the Payroll Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Nick Day. I'm the CEO at JGA Recruitment Group. We're specialist payroll recruiters. And if you're new to the show, welcome. I'm glad you've joined us and found us. Here on this show, we are trying to raise the profile of payroll globally. Now, I've got someone fantastic who's going to help us do that, because if you're watching this or listening to this and you think presentation skills don't apply to you because you, in inverted commas, don't give presentations, well, I think today's guest is going to challenge that idea in the most inspiring way possible. I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by Patricia Fripp. She's an award-winning speaker, speech coach, and the creator of Fripp Virtual Training, or FrippVT. She's the first women president of the National Speakers Association, co-author of Delivering Unforgettable Presentations, and for nearly 3 decades, she's been helping PayrollOrg and their members and other professionals in this wonderful payroll community of ours to build confidence and the skills to present with clarity and impact. And it's really important right now because we all know in payroll, we're trying to create and command these wonderful business cases for investment, for change, for improvement. And to do that, we need to be able to present with real power and vigor. At PayrollOrg, they even created an award specifically for Patricia, a Partner of Excellence Award, and she was its first ever recipient. So today we are going to be diving into how you, the payroll professional, can start to deliver high-performance presentations that really get noticed, that do build influence, and can absolutely boost your career. So whether you're presenting for your team, training clients, or you just want to speak with more confidence, Patricia is here today on the show to help you, because we want to really sound like we mean business. So Patricia, welcome to the Payroll
Thank
Podcast.
you, Nick. My pleasure to see you again.
Delighted to have you here. And of course, for those who may not be familiar with this, Patricia very kindly gave me 10 to 15 minutes of her time before my own presentation at PayrollOrg this year to give me a few pointers, and then sat in the front row, and I was a little bit nervous, I'll be honest, but I took everything on board, and every ounce of advice you gave me has gone into my bank, and it was absolutely invaluable. So I hope you can do the same for our listeners today. Before we get into that, though, I'm going to start with my first question, which is this. What do the words payroll, or does the word payroll mean to you?
It reminds me of my favorite and longest client, PayrollOrg.
Fantastic. You've been working with them for 30 years, is that right?
Well, the first time Dan Maddox booked me to speak, I was sponsored by ADP to deliver a luncheon in San Francisco in 1987. It was fairly early in my full-time career as a professional speaker. And then starting in the 90s, what I do for PayrollOrg has expanded considerably over the years. But yes, they are the best client, have the best audiences. Payroll professionals, I find in general, even if they're shy at the beginning, they are so appreciative of information to help them do their jobs better.
Absolutely. And of course, I know, because I've been a speaker at PayrollOrg, you also help the speakers well in advance of the talks themselves to get some confidence. You give them some worksheets, some virtual courses to follow. And I bring this to life because a lot of payroll professionals say, look, Nick, I don't give presentations. So for those listeners, what would you say to them?
Outside the privacy of your own home, all speaking is public speaking. And if you think of public speaking as any area of speaking and communication that helps your career, that's public speaking. What we don't always realize is perhaps you're at the lunch line in the employee cafeteria if you're going to the office. A conversation you have with the chief financial officer at the salad bar, if it's interesting and pithy, could well be remembered at a time that you say is, I met somebody in the cafeteria who made a very interesting comment. She belongs on this cross-functional team. Perhaps you get in the elevator and you see someone, an executive really important in your company, you know who he or she is, they don't know you. What do you say from the second to the 12th floor to make an impact? And it could be, congratulations on the presentation you gave at such and such. Or at the town hall meeting, you said this, and we in the payroll uh, department has taken that on and done this. By the way, I'm Patricia Fripp.
Wonderful. These are
It's these, because at the National Speakers Association convention, which of course is my convention like Congress for PAYO, I love cameo appearances. Very often people say, somebody just said this year, can you give me a 6-second video clip I can include in my presentation about continually improving? Well, if you can say something in 6 seconds worth listening to, people want to hear more.
Love that. Now, you'll hear lots of studies and lots of people say that I would, and I don't misquote here, I would rather die than speak publicly. There's a huge fear associated with public speaking. I love the idea that you mentioned every conversation is a presentation, essentially. But yet we hold this fear. For those that know the show, I'm very passionate about the concept of fear, that we need to lean into it if we really want to find our potential. But there will be people listening to this that don't know how to start that journey of overcoming that paralysis sometimes that it gives you when you think you have to speak out loud. So what advice would you give to those individuals?
Usually, I find even sometimes with 50-year-old executives who say to me, I have this very important presentation. I spent my entire career not speaking. I'm terrified. When I talk to them, it's usually because of some situation early in life. They were 8 years old, called on by the teacher and they didn't know what to say, or they weren't paying attention, didn't know what the answer was. What we have to do for ourselves and for anyone on our team is create a successful experience so that we can replace the fear slowly. Uh, I mean, people are often amazed, and you know yourself, you're seasoned, you know what you're going to say, you're a subject matter expert, but there's always a little apprehension before a big presentation. So, what I do at PAYO's Congress in some of my classes, I ask, is there anyone who would admit that terrified at the thought, can't imagine anything worse than standing on stage and looking at this audience? And some people bravely put their hands up. And I always pick somebody, like at this last Congress, and say, trust me, you don't have to speak. Take them by the hand, get them on stage, and then say, what you going to do? You're not going to say anything. You're just going to stand and model how a confident person looks. Keep your feet this is what you do with your hands. You just smile and breathe and look at the audience. Look, they're smiling back at you. I say, you're happy to say something? Well, yes. Right. What's your name? Where do you work? How long you been in payroll? And then they're warming up because our audiences, whoever your audience is, it can be your 3-person team. They want a good meeting. They're on your side. And everyone smile back. And I say, what would it do for you and your career if at the break you texted or called your boss and said, this is my first Congress, and at the first day I was on stage with one of the guest speakers and I got a standing ovation. Oh, that would be great. I look at the audience and say, does she deserve a standing ovation? They give it. So that is a false situation, but it demonstrates we just need mini success. And I say, think big, start small. Your goal might be, I want to feel comfortable reporting to to our senior management when I have to do every quarter. So that's it. So what do you do today to get you ready for your next presentation in 3 months? And what we do in our everyday conversation is what we take to the stage, even if it's only standing up in front of 6 executives. That's the stage for you. And just as you have a lot of energy and passion when you speak, people know you genuinely believe what you're saying and you love what you're doing. Take what you have. Perhaps you have a great knowledge of your subject. So you don't try and be Nick Day with all that energy if that's not your personality, but you build on your strengths. And you always need to have something to say while you're thinking about what you're going to say. And most people, their default position is to stand up and say, hello, I'm Patricia Fripp, and I'm the head of the payroll department, and thank you for your time. Don't do any of that. They know who you are. You're on the agenda. So if there's might be people you don't know, you would begin with thank you for the opportunity to update you on our latest project. In case we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Patricia Fripp, head of payroll, and it has been my pleasure to serve this company for 18 years. You have something to say. Now, you might not be word perfect with what you're saying, but you have an outline, and it's okay to take a note with an outline. And even if you have a script of what you're going to say, your script is to the rehearsal, not to come up and read. It is much better to be personable and look at the audience than it is to be word perfect and read a script. Practice on safe people. When you are speaking on behalf of your team, practice on your team. I just had a big presentation in March for the National Speakers Association. And you know, I've been a member for well over 40 years. And you never want anyone to say, oh, she was good, but you should have seen her when she was really good. So I took this very seriously and I practiced on test audiences multiple times and took the feedback, even at this point. So rehearsal, Michael Caine said this, Sir Michael Caine, rehearsal is the work, performance is the relaxation. So I tell my clients, you need to know your presentation so well, you can forget it. In other words, you stand up, you open your mouth, and the words fall flawlessly from your lips. Now, that is more of a high pressure presentation. But think of, for example, running a team meeting or contributing. Maybe you're new, it's not your department, you're fairly new, you don't have the confidence. This is what I always recommend. Look at the agenda and think, if I had the opportunity to make a comment, what would I comment on? What would you say? It's the matter of preparing, even if you don't get to say it. It gets your mind on how do you deliver a contribution. So you plan, and then if you were ever called on and you didn't expect it, you have already rehearsed with other comments that you might not have given. It gets you better prepared. So my suggestion, no matter what your career, what your position, or how seasoned you are, become perpetually prepared. It's like, thank you for the opportunity to update you on. That is a great default position. And when you are giving your opinion, don't say, I think we should do this. Instead say, on behalf of the dedicated 6-person team, our recommendation is to do this. We came to this conclusion based on, it's always your experience, your research, your collaboration. And this is proving to your leadership, you're thinking bigger than just your opinion. And when you bring an idea or suggestion, it's based on some solid research, collaboration, or or based on my 6 years experience being on this team, my recommendation is.
You raised some really interesting and good points. Certainly, the preparation prevents poor performance, which I think is really, really critical. And something you spoke to me about, and we've had a short conversation around this, which really resonated, which is, and I think this is where some of the fear sits, is we think we have to be right when we're on stage. What happens if there's something around payroll legislation and I get it wrong? And you said to me, Nick, people aren't there to hear about whether something is right or wrong. They're here to hear your experience, your view based on that 6, 10, 20 years experience. What's your view on the market based on everything that you've experienced? It may not be true for everyone in the audience. It'll be true for some, but it's giving your view. And I think when you take away that pressure of having to be right about everything, I think it's much easier to relax, as Sir Michael Caine said, into the performance. Now, I know that when I went through some of your literature prior to my talk, you talked about specificity, structure, and most importantly, in any talk, from my opinion, storytelling. And you used something called Frippicisms, and you said specificity builds credibility. Tell us a little bit more about those.
Well, yes, and I have quoted you and talked about you because you were saying, and this was so valuable, about storytelling and recruiting. Don't just list the activities, tell a story in one sentence, which you can do. It's like, our last payroll manager is now in charge of international payroll. The audience is smart enough to know, wow, I'm ambitious. That is a company that promotes from within. It's, you don't have to tell them everything. You help them imagine what is possible. And when it comes to specificity building credibility, and this was introduced to me really by a friend of mine 25 years ago, it and this does build your credibility and your confidence. So, for example, when I am writing a blog post, even or a LinkedIn post, and I would say, duh, 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 this proves it. And I ask myself, as my client, what is it? I know what it is, but the reader doesn't know what it is. So you remind them what the it is you're talking about. So that's the power of storytelling. That's the power of specificity. And if our audience were to listen and take one word and change, and that is, if it weren't a thing, what would it be? And if you look at, and I know with my clients, I was just working in Las Vegas in a lovely suite at the Wynn Hotel with an executive for 3 days working, and he's an expert on branding, talking about uh, working on his presentation. He has a classic presentation that we're upgrading because when he retires and sells his company very soon, he wants to speak more for higher fees. And every time he would say, "Is if it weren't a thing." And it's amazing. I looked through his book and I circled all the time, what did you really mean by that? And in his presentation, because we will not improve what we're not aware of. And the only way you can improve a word you might be using or removing a phrase that's irritating or too repetitive is to tell your friends around you, your colleagues or your spouse, I need your help. I'm working at being more specific every time you hear me say thing, which we don't realize. I want you to ask me, if it weren't a thing, what would it be? And it will drive you crazy for about 3 weeks, and then you'll get it, and then everyone else will irritate you to death. However, as I said to my exec, you will feel very superior. Yeah. So is looking at the specificity. It's another word might be, oh, I met a lot of interesting people at the convention. Well, what's a lot? There were 2,000 in attendance. I must have had good conversations with at least 100 people. And 5 conversations really stood out. I'm keeping in touch with them. This person I'm inviting to, or in the trade show, in the expo, I talked to 5 vendors. 3 we are having appointments with because they said such and such. That's being specific. You don't get tons of ideas from a Nick Day session. You have 2 pages of notes and 6 actionable items. Not tons, not bunches. Bunches are for fruit. Be specific. And one example I use, I was talking to an executive. I did a lot of work to help their speakers for the Executive Briefing Center. And I said, Michelle, it's limited to how many people we can coach. It's unlimited how many people we invite to listen and to watch the proceedings, getting them ready for when they're speaking. She said, great idea, because Greg just hired a boatload of people. I said, Michelle, was it a dinghy or an ocean liner? Because we use words to communicate. People remember what we say by the pictures they see. A snapshot from a story. And I said, how many people did Greg hire? She said 4. Well, I was expecting her to say 25. I said, Michelle, what is wrong with 4? It means in the same room, it's easy to squeeze 4 if there were 25 within another room. Can you see? It's just so simple. Just say what you mean.
It makes total sense. And even in a payroll context, a lot of people, if you have a 250 employee payroll, could mean 10 people, or let's say 25, that's 10% of your entire employee count. But of course, if you've got 100,000 employees, that's not a lot. So that specificity makes absolute sense. I remember when we met before my talk, I read you my introduction, how I was planning to introduce the talk. And immediately, bear in mind, I had about 5 minutes before the talk, we had this conversation. So my head was going, but you said, and I'd read this introduction, I'd rehearsed it and rehearsed it, and I was confident in my performance. But then you made me look at my whole introduction differently. And I love the phrase, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now, I would never have been able to identify what you identified in 2 minutes with all your expertise because I'd read it so much myself. It was my own thinking that created the introduction. So I couldn't see, because it was my own thinking that created it, where the problems existed. But actually, almost immediately, you brought the audience back into perspective, changed it into more of a question and a story. And I actually did change the introduction just before I went on stage following that conversation. But I think it's a really good example of when you work with other people, take the feedback. The experience you think you're delivering may not be the experience that's being received. So you need that kind of going back and forth. And it is really important for the listeners because, as you know, communication is absolutely a leadership differentiator. Well, I wonder if we can just expand on that a little bit, because a lot of our audience here are payroll professionals that want to take the next stage in their journey, as you mentioned in that advert example I gave. They want to take that journey from payroll manager to head of international payroll or whatever it might be in their next stage. So how can we start to use this to really differentiate ourselves in the marketplace?
Well, understand you begin where you are. I'll give you a specific case example. I was working with Patty Lake, no longer with us, but she was the woman of the year. And I was helping her with her presentation. And she said to me, and now was very important person, spoke at conferences. She was on stage getting this acknowledgement. And she said, when I first went to my first PAYO chapter, I was so shy, I would just register people when they were coming in. And I think that is a great job. You want to, because you have a reason to talk to people. You say, oh, here are the name tags. that's where the meeting is. The program will formally begin here. Put yourself in situations where you're really shy, but you have to say something. And you gradually build your confidence. It goes from there. Well, after that Congress, she went back to work, and through nothing that she did, they'd changed the organization. She was out of the job. They were outsourcing. She didn't have a job. And because of her payroll contacts, she said, I'll relocate anywhere. My husband will support me, whatever. I'm open for any opportunities. And she got a better job, more prestigious, higher pay, more people. And what she did, and of course, it takes a lot of confidence, which she had slowly developed from not being able to talk to anyone. So she made herself register people. She had the confidence to say to the leadership, yes, I will accept the position. However, I will not read any information in the files about any of my employees. I want to interview them and begin from scratch. And she discovered there were people there who had really been overlooked, who were eager for ambition, were eager for training and more possibilities. And she thrived, her team thrived, and it really was a case history of somebody who was shy, who slowly built her confidence. She made herself do what terrified her, and to the point where she was a magnificent leader. It doesn't happen overnight, but it happens with a commitment, an intent, and taking baby steps.
Attention payroll leaders, if you're listening to this, you already know that payroll has never been more complex. Compliance risks are rising, skilled talent is scarce, and getting it wrong can cost your business way more than just money. It can cost you trust, retention, and of course, brand reputation. I'm Nick Day, host of this show and also CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, specialist global payroll recruiters. Here at JGA, we're so passionate about payroll, we've even turned it into music. Don't believe us? Head to your favorite audio platform and search for Payroll Powers the World, and you can quite literally join us in song about how we believe payroll deserves its moment in the boardroom to shine. At JGA, we'd like to think our passion shines through to our recruitment results as well. With a 97% retention rate and an average 19-day job brief to hire success rate, we work fast, we work strategically, and we work with purpose to connect you to the hidden payroll talent that job ads and direct search methods will simply never reach. So if you're hiring or indeed planning to hire, why not partner with the experts that are shaping the future of payroll? Partner with jgarecruitment.com today, or better yet, drop me a message directly, and together we can make sure your next payroll hire is your best one yet.
It's a great example as well of how someone's potential really did live on the other side of her fear. She had to lean into that fear to really discover where she could find her success. I think it's a wonderful example. And of course, in your experience, you've coached many high-level executives, but also technical professionals as well. Payroll is a very technical industry. And I know that there are some of the not so basics of great business communication that I think you mentioned all payroll professionals should know. One of the tips you gave me when we spoke is, Nick, make sure your last words linger. I know you've got others as well. I wonder if you could share some of those with our audience.
Okay, good. Well, your first line, even if you introduce yourself, should not be I am. It was say something of interest, and it could be as simple as thank you for the opportunity too. Or what is one of my personal favorites, take an interesting statistic from your report and put it up front and add in motion. It might interest you to know that. It might surprise you to know that. So the first opening and the close, always not too long, shorter sentences, but interesting, because the purpose of the opening is to arouse interest in the subject. And that could be one-on-one at a networking event. I like to ask people, what's your claim to fame? And people often say, I don't have one. I say, oh, yes, you do. You're just too modest. Let's dig deep. Everyone has a claim to fame. Then work at what I consider the watching the I versus you ratio. I work on one premise, and that is everyone is more interested in themselves than they are in me. And what you might want to do is look at how can you phrase your sentences and develop you focused sentences. Like, it might surprise you to know that. In your experience, perhaps you have found that payroll professionals who get certified get paid more. So you're bringing them in. Even if you're telling a story, you might say, I wish you could have been there. Or, what would you have done in this situation? Anytime your audience hears you, they set up, that they re-engage. So open, close, you focus language, speak in shorter sentences or phrases. The written word is for the eye. If you're reading an article, you can have longer sentences. You can look back and say, oh, yeah, okay. You can't do that with speaking. So speak in shorter phrases. So the written word is for the eye. The spoken word is for the rhythm. It might interest you to know that based on our research, 98% of CPPs, whatever. So just think of the rhythm, and also pause. When you pause, you get to breathe, focus what comes next. And also the audience has time to think, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, I never thought of that. So it's still a duologue, even if the other people aren't talking to you, except the language is in their head. Oh, never thought of that. Really? Perhaps this is what we need. So give your audience time to digest what they've heard. That's a few. That's and then being specific and telling stories. And one secret about stories, if you're telling a story, deliver the dialogue. So there are two characters. So, for example, you're telling a story about talking to one of your vendors, talking to your boss, talking to a new associate. If you said, Mary said to me, well, there are two characters in the story. Who else is Mary talking to? So Mary said, and imagine the quotation marks around it. So I was talking to our latest employee, Mary. She said, Patricia, I want to do really well in this company. What advice would you give me? So you can imagine Mary is saying that, and in your mind or on paper, there'd be quotation marks. That is delivering the dialogue. Reporting on the dialogue is, I had a conversation with Mary, who is our newest employee, and she told me that she wants to do well in this company and asked my advice. So stories about people, and we want to hear them speak.
Love that. I obviously you'll be very well, I'm sure, after 40 years of training and delivering. You have a very natural way of using your tone, your energy, even on this interview, Patricia. You naturally will go heightened and have a laugh, and then you'll draw me in. Sometimes I'm just drawn into your own response. I've got to remember that I'm still interviewing you because you pulled me in with your silence. You pulled me in with your pause or your lower tone to say, Nick, you soften your tone
That's
and you pull
another
us in.
secret, Nick. Very often, if people have something important to say, they speak louder. Perhaps if you say a little softer, people lean into you.
It's very powerful. Very, very powerful. Now, of course, we can learn a lot of your techniques, and your wealth of 40 years of experience in this sector is on full display on your own course on FrippVT, your virtual training course. I visited your course. You've got virtual trainings, you've got documents, you've got I think 4 different courses people can choose from. Tell us a little bit more about your on-demand coaching platform. And from a payroll leader that really wants to learn more about how I can really become an
If
expert in
you
this space.
Yes, so anyone who is really serious about making a small investment and getting RCH credits for them if they're in Payo, uh, go take a trial of Fripp virtual training, FrippVT. So that is, and of course we have user meetings. So anyone who has an account, we come in and we have group coaching sessions that are a lot of fun. But frippvt.com go. Also, if you go to fripp.com, I have over 1,000 blog posts. So, and I send out weekly mailings. So you can just go click free resources and you have special reports on one, for example, that's very popular with payroll professionals is how to report to your senior management without being terrified. So we have a
Yeah.
lot of free content, fripp.com. Go play around.
I can see why that'd be popular. Of course, you've written a book as well, Deliver Unforgettable Presentations, How to Speak to be Remembered and Repeated in person, online, and on
Yes.
stage.
Yes. So if you really are giving speeches and you get it on Amazon, it's a step by step of putting together an unforgettable presentation.
Fantastic. Now, for those that are interested, just to remind you all, both the link to FrippVT.com and to Patricia's book will be available in the show notes of this episode of the show. So you don't need to Google it or look for it. Go straight through to the episode notes. The URLs will be there so you can click straight through to grab your copy or indeed to find out more about Patricia's wonderful training programs as well. What I also wanted to mention is, from my perspective as a recruiter, a global recruiter, I speak to a lot of payroll professionals worldwide who are desperately trying to raise not just the profile of the industry, but the profile of themselves in what is a wonderful career to help them take the next step. And I think it's really important they understand that actually this could be the first stepping stone to getting on stage at somewhere like Payroll Congress, at the Chartered Institute of Payroll Professionals in the UK or the South African Association, wherever it might be. If you want to get on stage and be remembered and deliver compelling talks that help raise your profile, I would always say it's really important you take the first step as learn to become a great speaker, go to your training and take that first step because it's surprising how many people want to do it, but don't know where to get started or don't have the confidence to. And of course, you give them all of those tools. So if you're really serious about making that step in your career, I really do recommend taking that step. And I'm sure you've seen a number of people over your 30 years working with Payo, Patricia, where you've seen individuals go from shy to being a regular talker. I saw Michael Francis give his second talk this year, and what an improvement. He gave a great talk the year before, but you can see the natural development in his talk. Really, really impressive. Are there any great examples you've given or people you've seen or supported through Payo?
Well, dozens, dozens and dozens. Uh, because the good part about Payo, it's like seeing. So I always say, because Jim Medlock is known for his programs on non-taxable fringe benefits, and I always say a non-taxable fringe benefit is the amount relationships you develop and how you see people build in their confidence. And this, a lot of credit goes to Dan Maddox, the executive director, because he realized decades ago you hire professional speakers and then you have your own leaders on stage speaking. And he wanted his goal was to increase the quality and confidence and competence of the payroll professional leadership so that when they're on stage following or prior to the main stage professional speakers and industry experts, that they held their own.
Yeah. And you can really see that come through on the stages when you're there. And I do recommend it. It hasn't been to Payo, go out and have a look. There are some, if you can make some of these subjects are quite dry, but following your training, you've got some amazing entertaining talks and what you would initially sometimes think would be quite a dry subject. You go into the room and you get entertained. It's amazing.
Now, this is a Frippicism. There are no boring subjects. There are only boring speakers. Do I have time for one more
Of
example?
course you do. I'd love to hear it. Sounds like a good one.
Many years ago, I was speaking at a governor's conference in Ohio in celebration of apprenticeship. And of course, in England, before I came to America, I served an apprenticeship to be a hairstylist. And of course, I evolved from that. However, that's one of the reasons they hired me, because I'd served an apprenticeship. And after my keynote, as is my habit, I always like to do breakout sessions. So people, you can coach them, and I made this statement: there are no boring subjects, only boring speakers. And the man put his hand up, and he said, "I speak on a boring subject." No such thing. I'm not saying I'm wrong, but I'm always going to fight for my opinion. And I said, "Well, what's your subject?" He said, "I teach OSHA rules and regulations for 6 hours." I brought him up to stage. I said, "Give me one rule." He said, "You got to wear your safety goggles." I said, "Tell me one story about one man who one time didn't wear his safety goggles." And then I said, "This is how you would begin your presentation. Imagine you are a 22-year-old wife and mother of two, and you kiss your husband, the sole breadwinner for the family, as he goes off to work on a construction site on Main Street opposite Kroger. And while he is drilling through a wall to put a pipe, a big chunk of concrete jumps out and hits him in the eye, and he isn't wearing the safety goggles. They take him to hospital, comes home. You nurse him back till he's well enough to go back to work. Now, when you kiss him goodbye, how do you feel when he goes back to the same job on the same site with only one good eye, and you are fairly confident he's not going to wear his safety goggles? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2025 OSHA rules and regulations. You know them, you teach them. However, the purpose of this training is to remind you how important it is for the health and safety of your crew and for the insurance of your company. So again, you might only take a few tiny stories out of the 128 OSHA rules and regulations, but the purpose of reopening to is arouse interest, to put the emotion behind the rules and regulations. So that's one way to highlight and go along with your whole theme. You've got to tell stories to get your message across.
And actually, it does something else as well, because you mentioned earlier on in today's episode that one of the biggest, I guess, mistakes, if that's the right word, is we overload our audience. Now, I know I'm probably not going to remember the next 180 rules and regulations, but I'll remember the first one: wear
Oh,
your
yeah.
safety goggles. And
Yes.
sometimes, whatever the most important thing is, that's the message we want to get across. And I think sometimes in talks, we stuff so much in that the audience remembers nothing. It's too much for them.
No, it is better as a principal to tell them less, have them remember it, make an impact, and encourage them. Take 3 rolls a day and remind yourself, because very often they say a professor's job at college is to get you excited about a subject so you want to research it. They don't have time to tell you everything you need to know. They have to excite you that you want to study it. And that would be the same with any subject like rules and regulations.
As I think you said, if I remember correctly, in your Frippicisms, clarity over clutter. Is that right?
I don't believe I said that, but I will
Oh,
in the future.
I'm sure. I thought that came from you. Well, you certainly said something similar and along those context lines for sure. Well, my last question before I open the payroll vault is along the lines of, what is the most common mistake people do make that can do the opposite, can actually undermine their credibility? Just something for our listeners to look out for.
In general, not beginning planning for a presentation early enough. I have a lot of executives, they are rewriting their speech the night before they're going to deliver it. In general, I would say, believing they're not public speakers. We're all public speakers if you're in public.
Well, I think that is a wonderful way to round off the main questions of today's episode. Now, there is, of course, the Payroll Vault. These are 3 short, sharp questions for you, Patricia, which we're going to include in a special episode later in the season. The first is this: what's the best piece of advice you've ever received that's helped shape your career or your communication style?
My father, the first day he pushed me out the door to get the bus to go to begin my apprenticeship. He said, in your career, don't concentrate on making a lot of money. Concentrate on becoming the type of person people want to do business with, and you most likely make a lot of money.
Wonderful advice. Love that. Number 2, if you could change one misconception people have had about public speaking or presenting, what would it be?
It's not scary, it's fun.
I agree with you, by the way. And what's one daily habit or technique that payroll professionals specifically could implement immediately to start communicating with more impact?
The night before, look at the meetings you're going to have or attend, the conversations you're going to have, and make a comment to yourself of what you would include or how you'd begin the conversation.
Amazing. Patricia Fripp, I've been so looking forward to this episode. Thank you so much for giving up your time to be with me on the Payroll Podcast today. I think you've been absolutely brilliant. You've given us storytelling insights, practical speaking techniques, and the confidence, I hope, to really walk into that next team meeting or that next presentation where we can really own the room with storytelling and insights and clarity. So thank you ever so much for joining me today on the Payroll Podcast. Of course, listeners, please do head to FrippVT.com. If you want to explore Patricia's online platform, you can, as you say, earn your RCH credits as well while leveling up your communication skills at exactly the same time. And of course, the links to both FrippVT.com and her book will be in the show notes of this episode. So please do check those out as well. And if you did enjoy this episode, please remember to review it, share it with your payroll colleagues and friends, and together we can really raise the profile of payroll worldwide. Patricia Fripp, thank you ever so much for being a guest on today's episode of the Payroll Podcast.
My pleasure.
Global teams are more connected today than ever. But managing payroll, HR, and IT can still feel fragmented. But Deel simplifies global work with one platform that keeps everything running smoothly. No compliance guesswork, no third-party payroll, just seamless operations backed by 24/7 expert support. That's why over 35,000 companies trust Deel to handle their global workforce. Visit Deel.com/nickday to see how Deel can help. That's DEEL.com/NICKDAY. Deel, your forever people platform.